Chapter 62-74. At this time, Charlie gave Steve a look, and Steve understood and said, "Everyone, you have been arguing for so long, why not let me say something fair?" When everyone saw Steve start to intervene, hope suddenly ignited in their hearts. And Nate looked at Steve nervously, fearing that he would really support these people. Steve said at this time, "I have just understood some of your affairs. From my point of view, everyone present has problems." At this point, he looked at the people behind Jimmy and said very seriously, "Objectively speaking, your problems are bigger." When everyone heard this, their hearts sank, but Nate's face was full of surprise. Steve continued, "You are here to complain that your boss set a trap for you. But have you ever thought that if you abide by the duties of an employee, you will not fall into his trap at all?" At this point, Steve subconsciously glanced at Charlie, and then said, "There is an old saying that flies don't bite seamless eggs. You yourself have loopholes and weaknesses, so it is natural for others to conquer you. And don't forget that the mistakes you made are not only moral, but also legal." Everyone was even more gloomy at this moment. Steve said so, but it seems that he will not side with them. At this time, Steve looked at Nate and said, "Of course, as a boss, it is not honorable for you to use this method to control your employees. Try to avoid it in the future." Nate did not expect that Steve would be so polite to him, and categorized the other party's behavior as a dual problem of morality and law, and categorized his behavior as not honorable, which clearly showed that he was biased towards him. This made him very excited, and he hurriedly said respectfully, "You are right, Mr. Rothschild. I will pay attention in the future and never do such dishonorable things again." "Yeah." Steve nodded gently, looked at him very sincerely, and said, "Nate, I personally admire you very much. If you can look at the bigger picture and don't leave yourself too much room for words, you actually have unlimited prospects in the American judicial field and even in the political field." Nate's eyes widened, and he asked in surprise and joy, "Mr. Rothschild, do you really think so?" Steve nodded and said, "To be honest, many outstanding politicians in the United States are lawyers. In this regard, you already have a great innate advantage. What's more, no one knows how to use and undermine the law better than lawyers. This is your invincibility. Have a sharp weapon, and you have made extraordinary achievements in the field of law. In this case, why don't you expand your vision a little bit and look up instead of down?" Nate asked carefully, "Mr. Rothschild, what do you mean?" Steve said, "What I mean is that you can obviously seek broader prospects and a brighter future. But you mistakenly focus on your employees and how to tie them up and make them serve you like slaves forever. You are like a farmer who desperately exploited slaves in the 19th century. You pointed the gun at them and told them not to escape. But you didn't think about what would happen if you pointed the gun at them. Outside the entrance to your manor, you will have a great opportunity to continuously expand your territory and double, even tenfold or 100-fold your farm." When Nate heard this, he immediately understood what Steve meant and said with shame, "Mr. Rothschild, you are right, I really shouldn't limit myself to these employees." Steve nodded and continued, "I will give you the best solution for this matter. But whether you adopt it or not is up to you." Nate was flattered and said, "Please say it, Mr. Rothschild." Steve said, "These people have already had a gap with you, and the possibility of you continuing to make good use of them is gone. Instead of this, why not let these people do other things? You take your board members back to the United States and think about how to move to the next level. As for these people, let them just stay in China and help me. It just so happens that I also need some lawyers here. In the future, you two sides will be separated by an ocean. Just respect each other like guests, and no one will cause trouble for each other. What do you think?" Nate didn't have time to think about it. His mind was full of Steve's words about moving to the next level. The others finally breathed a sigh of relief because Steve finally started to speak for them. He wanted everyone to respect each other like guests and not interfere with each other. That also meant that Nate couldn't use the evidence to punish them. After Steve finished speaking, he looked at Nate and asked him, Kate, what do you think of my proposal? So Nate said, Mr. Rothschild, since you said so, I certainly have no objection. Let them stay here to help you. As long as they serve you well, I will definitely not make things difficult for them. Steve nodded and said, in that case, then let's make it a deal. I'll let Jimmy select 10 people from them. These 10 people will stay in Orris Hill to help me in the future. If it's inconvenient for you, I'll pay their salaries. When Nate heard this, he blurted out, No, 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 Mr. Rothschild, how can you pay their salaries? I'll pay for it.